to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Dr. Fike.
Here.
Mr. Friend.
Here.
Mrs. Geyer. Here. Mr. Lizzo.
Here.
Mrs. O'Rear.
Here.
Mr. Polakowski.
Here.
Mrs. Shipley.
Here.
Mr. Shipley, I'm so sorry. Mrs. Smith. Mrs. Williams. Lily Wasman. Caleb Tax.
Here.
Not until...
Temporary chairperson.
I think we have a citizen's comment.
We do. We do have one. Yes.
Yes. All right. If there are any individuals who would like to address the board this evening, if you want to come forward.
I do have one, Dr. Fike.
Dr. Fike, you can stay up here if you would like.
My name is Catherine Fike, and I live in Roughdale, PA. Something very important is going to happen here tonight. A reorganization meeting. When someone is elected to the school board, their responsibility is to the students and the community, not to the other 8 members of the school board. There's an old Italian proverb that says, great griefs are often mute. One death is a tragedy. Thousands of deaths become a statistic. Damage is cumulative. One failing student is a problem. When there are hundreds of students who are failing, that is a tragedy. Under the direction of this present school board, I have many deep concerns about what has been happening. Our students, based on lies and misinformation, lost 2 full years of their educational program in this facility. Personnel in Southmoreland are leaving. They're being forced out. These are people who have tried to do their jobs and couldn't. I'm very concerned because hiring is an issue. I personally have never had COVID in any way, shape, or form. When other board members had it, and I was forced to sit in a plastic cage, nothing was done about them. I'm still waiting for that apology. Southmoreland to date has received, I believe, about $3.5 million in ESSER's money. That money was designed, or at least they say that money was designed, to remediate our children who lost that educational benefit. $3.5 million. We have 5 teachers. 5 teachers to serve 1,800 kids, split it in half, 900 kids, 5 teachers. Property taxes have continued to increase. So tonight you're going to see a school board who's going to reorganize itself. They're going to give a clear statement to the community, to all of you. Will things continue as they have been? Or will there be a change in leadership to do the honorable, responsible, and honest actions for our children and our community? I guess the thing that bothered me the most was when the citizens in our school district had to look at a Facebook page that said, I hope you all get COVID and die. I hope this is the end of that kind of an attitude. Listen carefully to their message. There's either going to be more of this or there's going to be a change.
Thank you.
The temporary chairperson.
Temporary chairperson, call for nominations of the office of the president for a one-year term. 3 calls are required.
Give it to chairperson.
For what? We had a demo.
I'm sorry. It is recommended that the board appoint a temporary chairperson for the purpose of reorganization.
I will elect our solicitor.
Second.
Temporary chairperson is our solicitor, Rebecca Hall. Voice vote. Do I hear a voice vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Voice vote unanimous.
Good evening. I'm Rebecca Hall. I'm the solicitor for the Southmoreland School District. I'll be sitting in the chair of the president just temporarily until we elect a new one at this point. I would like to ask if there are any nominations at this time for the office of president for a one-year term.
Mrs. Chairman, I've been a member of the school board for quite a few years, on and off.
Can you put the microphone closer to you? I can't hear. Can you put the microphone closer?
Okay. Oh, you have to hear me, don't you? Okay. I've been a member of this board for almost 14 years, on and off. And I'll tell you what, I'm a firm believer that you don't change a horse during the race. And boy, we are in a race. And I would really appreciate it if Mrs. Williams would take the nomination again. I think we're at the point right now that we just we get into the end of it. We start seeing the light, monetarily wise and everything else. And even though I don't agree with her on everything, she has done a good job as president. So at this time, I'd like to place her name in nomination.
So I have Mr. Lizza nominating Ms. Williams. Are there any other nominations for the office of president for a one-year term?
I'm with the nominations be closed.
Need to do 3 calls. I was on number 2, Mr. Lizza. Final call. Is there any other nominations for the office of president for a one-year term? Hearing none, could I have a motion to close?
Motion to close. Second.
All right, there is one person nominated at this time. It is Ms. Williams. I would like to instruct the secretary to cast a unanimous ballot for Ms. Williams as the board president for 1 year.
I'll move.
Williams, I will hand over your chair.
Where Michelle goes, the bag goes.
Do we need more pencils?
I dropped mine, I'm sorry, but I have a pen, I'm good. Election of vice president for a term of 1 year.
Chairman, at this time, I'd like to nominate
So Mr. Lizza has nominated Christy Smith. Do we have any other nominations? Are there any other nominations for vice president? Are there any other nominations for vice president? I need a motion to close nominations.
So move.
Second.
Yes.
You can cast them.
I'd like to cast a unanimous vote for Mrs. Smith for vice president for a term of 1 year. Election of board treasurer for a term from December 2022 to May 2023. So Mrs. Mondock has been nominated by Mrs. Smith. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations for board treasurer? Are there any other nominations for board treasurer? I need a motion to close the nominations,
So move.
Second.
and I'd like to cast a unanimous vote for Mrs. Mondock. Legislative chairperson right now is Mrs. Kristen Smith, and we believe that that position should be another one that ends later. Is that?
So this term seems to run September. It's during the school year. It seems to start in September and end in May. The first meeting was a training on how everything was going to happen. So we don't have to do it this time since it's late notice, but I would say the next time, unless everybody wants to, it should be definitely something that's elected like in July or June for the school year. Because
What's the difference if we do it now?
so if somebody new goes in there, then they would have missed, we did an advocacy training because the meetings run October, every other month from October through May. So I would have gotten my training, or someone would have gotten their training, and then they're out, and the person that goes in did not receive the training or do anything like that. We could do that next year if you want to, maybe say,
Do you meet over the summer?
no.
So May would be like your last. So if we did that the same as, so right now we would just appoint from December 2022 to May 2023. And do that the same as the board treasurer.
Yes. Oh, well, Dr. Pfeiffer is right that, that person could change in December.
Next December.
So it could change
It could change anyway.
halfway through.
Okay, so do we just want to let this go as it is and? Okay, so.
I would be happy to continue to do it through the school year, and if something changes,
So right now I think it's Mrs. Smith and Mrs. O'Rear. So we should just nominate and carry it through.
Yeah,
Okay.
just nominate
So I
and carry
need
it.
nominations for an appointment of 2 legislative chairpersons.
Are you going from the December to the May?
No, we're just going to go just
Okay.
carry it through because it could be an election issue anyway. Do I have a nomination? I need 2.
Nominate Christy Smith and Nicole O'Rear.
So Mrs. Geyer has nominated Mrs. Smith and Mrs. O'Rear. Do I hear any other nominations? Do I have any other nominations for legislative chairperson? Are there any other nominations for legislative chairperson?
I nominate Stephanie Geyer.
And
Okay, so I have Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Geyer and Mrs. O'Rear. Do you not want to do this? Okay. So would you like to decline your nomination?
Yes, I would like to decline my nomination.
Are you okay with that, Mrs. Geyer? Okay. Are there any other nominations? So I'd like to cast a unanimous vote for legislative chairpersons as Mrs. Geyer and Mrs. Smith. Sorry, I needed a motion to close.
Second.
Thank you.
Just so you know, there's a meeting tomorrow morning at 7:30.
See why I could never get there.
You're kidding? Or are you for real?
7:30 a.m. tomorrow morning, yes. I was waiting until after you accepted and everything went through.
Wow.
Way to play that.
Okay, so I need a motion. I need nominations for the appointment of PSBA representative. Currently, that is Mr. Frun.
I'll nominate
I'll
Mr.
make a
Brown.
motion. My right-hand man over here. Waiting
Okay,
for
so
him.
Mrs. Smith has nominated Mr. Frun.
And I second the nomination.
Are there any other nominations for
Thank you.
PSBA representative? Are there any other nominations for PSBA representative?
Is it just the one?
Yes. That one, I believe, we just have one. Are there any other nominations for PSBA representative? I need a motion to close the nominations.
So moved.
Second.
I'd like to cast a unanimous vote for Mr. Frund. Okay, board meeting calendar.
I think so. Yes. Let me look at it. Sorry. Yeah, because we have
What's the dates on it? Second, is it second Thursday of the month?
So I'd like to make a motion to approve the board meeting calendar. I need a second. Is there any discussion? I think there's 2 dates to take notice of. That would be the May date, I believe, has changed, and the June date as well. We have 2 June meetings.
2 June meetings, once for the budget, yes.
The second meeting will just be to adopt the budget. The 30-day period was a problem. And we also thought that generally we get to that point and need an extra meeting as well. And Pam and I did not want to push that meeting out till the last possible second, because then we're all a little nervous if we're gonna have enough votes at the meeting.
Thank you.
So we'll be meeting May 11th, June 8th, and June 26th. The June 26th will just be a special budget voting meeting. Any other discussion about that? Okay, and actually that June 26th is a Monday.
It is, yeah.
November 9th, though, can we make sure, because our last one was on Veterans Day. Can we make sure it's not on Veterans Day?
That'll be the 11th. Yeah, so that would be a Saturday next year, I think.
Correct.
Yeah, so that should be good.
Oh, okay. Okay, good.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Newspaper of general circulation. I'd like to make a motion that we accept the Daily Courier. Discussion?
I have a question, Peggy. Almost every Sunday, I open the Tribune Review, and there's ads in there for Southmoreland. Does this prohibit us from doing that, or how do you get around that with the Tribune Review?
This is just it's just always been, since it's so local, our calendar, the board has always made this the daily
I mean,
newspaper.
I don't have a problem with that. I'm
Right.
just wondering how you do the Tribune Review then, because it's in almost every Sunday.
I'm not sure. I know it costs. I only put legal ads. Well, I put advertisements, but they're very expensive in the Trib.
That's why I asked. That's why I
Yeah,
asked.
they're
'cause
very
usually pretty
expensive.
long.
Yeah,
pretty long,
yeah.
and I just wondered how
Those
that
are
was
just for
covered.
employment,
And
correct?
for
Those are
employment,
for
yes.
employment?
The legal ads, I only put in the Courier, the legal and,
So this only applies to legal advertisements.
well, that's, I do put in help wanted if we have a need to hire someone, I do put them in the Courier also.
Because I know the trib charges by the inch.
Oh, yeah.
Huge.
Yes.
Huge.
Is there any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Do we have any other citizen comments?
No.
I need a motion to adjourn this portion of the meeting.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? I'm going to call the meeting to order. Roll call.
Dr. Fike?
Here.
Mr. Frond?
Here.
Mrs. Geyer? Here. Mr. Lizza?
Here.
Mrs. O'Rear? Here. Mr. Polakowski?
Here.
Mr. Shipley?
Here.
Mrs. Smith? Mrs. Williams?
Here.
Lily Wasman? Caleb Tax?
Here.
Do we have any citizens' comments?
No.
I'd like to make a motion to approve agenda items 1 and 2 under minutes.
Second?
Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Letting you read your
That's okay. Reports.
superintendent information.
This time, we'll first hand it over to our student representative, Mr. Tex.
Ms. Farrell and her students want to send out a huge thanks to Dr. Boone, Mr. Krofcheck, and Ms. Colbank for their support and encouragement in the growth of the coffee shop and supporting the needs of Scotty Perk. The Scotty Perk has made itself a home in its new location in the Student Union at Southmoreland High School. Profits from the coffee shop are used to host field trips for learning support students, such as the first trip in October to Pittsburgh Zoo and PPG Aquarium, and the second in November to Westmoreland Community College and the Advanced Technology Center located at the old Sony plant. Scotty Perk will host our Triangle Tech program in Greensburg, PA on January of 2023. Field trip destinations have been selected by the students' interest in programs and fields of study that are offered. Ms. Utira and Dr. Brown are hosting Poetry Out Loud, a poetry recital competition sponsored by the National Endowment for the Arts. To compete, each student selected from a variety of poems which they will present to an audience and panel of judges on December 15th during the school day. The competition helps students master public speaking skills, build self-confidence, and learn about poetic style. The winner of the school-wide competition will have the opportunity to compete at the regional level for cash prizes. A total of 23 students are registered to compete locally. A special thank you to Dr. Clara, Mrs. Smith, Ms. Zambariti, and Dr. Cerrone for volunteering to judge the competition. Just before tonight's varsity wrestling match, a banner ceremony was held for Henry Miller's PIAA State Swim Championship. We would like to once again congratulate him on this outstanding achievement. Our girls basketball team has extended their home court winning streak to 45 games. Their next home game is the 13th at 7:30, where they hope to extend their streak against Albert Gallatin. And finally, plans are underway for Bump It Up 2022, our holiday elimination volleyball competition hosted by Student Council. This will take place on December 22nd in the high school gymnasium. A final assembly of the day will host the last round of the competition between the two remaining teams who will compete for the Bump It Up championship title. Our Snow King and Queen will also be crowned at the assembly. Students will begin voting for the Snow King and Queen during all lunches on Friday by donation to individual snow court donation cans. All money raised will benefit the Make-A-Wish Foundation.
Thank you.
Our next item is a presentation of the 2022 spring assessment data. So if we want to step down there, we'll drop the projection screen, and I'll start the projector.
welcome. Whatever to no water, no water tonight.
Oh, I'm thirsty.
Okay, so this is about 49 slides. So I was asked to provide a data overview, so I was pretty thorough. You're going to see all kinds of different data that our district uses, and including our PSSA and Keystone results, our PSSA and Keystone growth results, some data from the CWCTC with how well our students are doing there, our AP testing data from the high school, and then we also have some dual enrollment and college and high school data for several courses up here at the high school. And then finally, I ended up with an Act 158 snapshot for our current class of 2023. And this is new legislation that was passed that enables our students to graduate using 5 different pathways. And this will be the first graduating class here at Southmoreland that actually has to fit through one of those 5 different pathways in order to graduate. So I wanted the board to know all of these things before we get into some more detailed presentations from building principals in January and February. So, a couple definitions I wanted to go over. Within the presentation, you'll see reference to MC being multiple choice questions, OE being open-ended response questions, and those are typically ones where our students need to read a longer question, understand what the question is asking of them, and then respond to them primarily in writing, based upon whatever the question is asked of them. It's a little bit more than a quick question. P&A is the basically passing, proficient, or advanced, and then CNA is more for a CWCTC data. CNA, C stands for competent. They use competent instead of proficient. Now, I do have reference in there from a change from this past year's data to what it was pre-COVID, because I think that's important. It'd be one thing to take a look at this year's data versus last year's data. To me, it's more meaningful to take a look at what our reality was 5 years prior to COVID, because that's what we were living with. That's what we were to what we are now. And then the last thing important to notice is NOCD is the national certification exam for all of our CTC students. So all the different programs over there, the NOCDs happen in the spring. There is a written component of it, and then there is a hands-on component of it as well that the students have to do. So, a couple things to know. When we're talking PSSAs and Keystones, and we're talking proficiency, proficiency is different by content area, and it's different by grade. So there are some grade areas, if you look at this table here, in ELA, you need a 51% in order to be deemed proficient. There's other grades where you may have to get up to a 57.69% in order to be proficient. So those change year to year. And grade level to grade level. Now, they're always within this somewhere 50 to 60% range I found over the past decade. In math, if you look, the lowest cutoff is 50%. You need to have 50% of the problems correct in order to be proficient. That's actually on our Algebra 1 test. And then the highest one is 63.46. I believe that's grade 8 math. In science, you see in grade 4 science is the lowest threshold. You need to get 40% of the questions correct in order to be proficient in grade 4 math. And then the highest is 53.13, and that's our bio keystone. If you get 53% on the exam, you're deemed proficient. So, and I'll leave this slide up here for a second. This is all of our data in terms of grades 3 through Keystone Literature. Now, important to note, students have the chance to retest in any Keystone exam. I only chose to highlight those students who took the test for the first time, because that's a true indicator of what our curriculum is. The first time you take the test, this gives you the most accurate data in terms of how well we do with that curriculum. So if you look, our amount of students who are proficient in advanced range from 47.6% in grade 3 are proficient in advanced. And then I highlighted that column in red just so it stands out a little bit. And then when we get to the high school, roughly 44.7% of our kids are proficient the first time they take the literature exam. So some of you are used to data that compares schools to schools. I like to look at data that compares Southmoreland to the rest of the IU schools and the rest of the state. And I'll conclude that after we go through all of these. So this is a snapshot of all of our students that took any ELA test in grades 3 through the high school literature test. So, something to look at, and the way to read this is 47.5 kids in grade, 47.5% of kids in grade 3 were proficient in advanced, and that was a change. So pre-COVID, we were 25.8% higher than that as an average for 5 years. So roughly we were at around 73, 74% as an average pre-COVID. COVID hit, and now we're sitting at 47.6% in grade 3. So that's how you would read the difference in that column there. Grade 4, this year 55.6% proficient advanced. That's 12 percentage points lower than it was pre-COVID. So by and large, as you go down, you see that every one of these assessments, we're still reeling from the effects of COVID, and we have work to do in terms of identifying what those skills are that students are struggling with, and then filling in those gaps. I have a breakdown based upon how our students do on multiple choice questions and open-ended questions. And to me, that's important, and I'll get into that later on in the presentation. I also broke it down in terms of our students, and here's our math results. So from 50% in grade 3, you get down to Algebra 1 in the middle school and the high school. 47.5% of our students who take it the first time in the middle school were proficient in advanced. When we get to the high school, 2% of the students who took the Algebra 1 Keystone exam for the first time were proficient or advanced. 2. If you look, once again, at that next column, the change from pre-COVID, that basically says how we were before COVID hit versus how we are now. So the way to read that, I'll explain again. In grade 3, if you look, we were roughly 18 percentage points less than what we were pre-COVID. So roughly, we were operating at around a 68% proficient in advanced in grade 3. Now we're at 50. Going down. Looking at our students who take Algebra 1 for the first time in high school, 2% being a low number. If you look at what the average was prior to COVID, the average for 5 years prior to COVID was roughly 5% proficient in advanced for the first time they take it to high school. So, and there's a reason for that. This slide here tells me exactly why there's a reason for that. If you look at the last column, open-ended, our students typically only get 14% of the points available for them on open-ended questioning in algebra. They're struggling on how to read those problems, on what the problems are asking of them, and then how to respond to them. The issue is that is the highest test in terms of that amount of questioning than any other state assessment we have. Almost half of the test is open-ended questioning for that assessment. So if we cannot perform well on open-ended questioning, we're going to have a very, very hard time doing well in that assessment. In terms of science, start out pretty strong, then you see as you go through. We were pretty close in grade 4, only an 8% difference pre-COVID. That's pretty close. I'll take that right now. When you get into grades 8 and biology, you see some other differences. We have a 42% in grade 8, 34% first time taken biology. So you see prior to COVID, we were higher than that. We were roughly at the 60% proficiency range in bio for the first time taking it. We're still trying to gather that gap between what happened with COVID and now. So I also did break down how our students with IEPs are doing and how our students who are economically disadvantaged, since we have a high number of students in this district who are economically disadvantaged as well, just to make sure. One of the state's push is to make sure that we have the same curriculum that goes out to all students regardless of their backgrounds and who they are. And this is one of the ways to ensure that that happens. If you look, when I looked at the countywide data when I worked at the IU, there were some pockets throughout the county where students with IEPs actually did better through COVID than their peers who didn't have IEPs. This is in this case that if you look at grade 4 ELA, there wasn't too much of a difference, which is good. So maybe there's something happening in grade 4 with our students with IEPs that's getting them pretty close to what they were prior to COVID. In other areas, you see a bigger difference. Here's a snapshot with math. If you look, we actually had grade 4 math do a little bit better now than they did prior to COVID, which is impressive. Now you'll see that in Algebra 1 in the middle school, there are zeros across the board, meaning that we didn't have any student that had an IEP take the Algebra 1 Keystone exam. Not one. And then here's our science data. So grade 4, it was roughly similar to what it was with all of our students. Once we get down to grade 8 and the high school with biology, you see a little bit of a difference there. Same kind of data, just with our economically disadvantaged kids. This was an area that the Pittsburgh Business Times really, really highlighted Southmoreland School District back in the day in terms of how well we do for our students that are economically disadvantaged. So that's why it's important to take a look at this and see exactly where we're at with this snapshot. If you look, we are still well behind what it was prior to COVID. Same thing with math. And same thing with science. So there's still work to be done. Now, you always hear me say that I think growth is a more important indicator of how well a school does aside from achievement. And these growth scores are kind of going to show the grade levels within our curriculum that are doing well in terms of growing kids at least one academic year. And there are pockets of excellence, I would say, as you go through the next couple of slides. So in terms of ELA, the way you read this is, okay, that green in the middle essentially is the targeted area to say that you've made 1 year of growth within your students. If you go to the right to the dark blue, that means you are making greater gains. If you go to the left to the red, you're falling short of that mark. So you're not growing kids as much as you are predicted to be growing them within that academic year. So essentially, the higher the number, the better. When I take a look here, I see grade 5 ELA as a pretty strong number. I see grade 6 ELA. I see some greens at the middle school in grade 7 and overall. And those are some good areas, some good things to talk about. We are showing growth in certain grade levels for ELA. Same thing with math. If you look at math, starting with grade 4 all the way up through grade 8, we're either green or blue. If you look across the county, that's pretty good. When we get into our Algebra 1 at both the middle school and the high school, I start seeing a little bit of yellow and red. But once again, I think that goes directly to the fact that our students are struggling with our open-ended questioning, and that's the hardest test with that. And then here's what we're looking at in terms of science. So I see the yellow and I see the reds here, and that's some call for concern. What I like about it is we have an opportunity in front of us because the state has introduced new science standards that all school districts are going to need to adopt and implement here over the course of the next couple of years. Taking a look at this data and knowing that we're going to have to change anyways puts us in a good spot in order to make that change and to understand that there's going to be some higher standards that are coming from the state in order for us to adopt. Onto CTC data. So if you look in terms of the written test, the CTC data is 90% of our students are competent or advanced on the written component of the test, which is outstanding. I don't get the data of all the other schools, so it's not published. So I can't tell you how we are in relation to other schools across the county, but 90% is pretty good. If you look at the performance side of things, hands-on, what the kids actually have to do, what they're learning, we're looking at 95%, which is outstanding, because those tests are pretty thorough. And then what they do is they combine those overall, and once again, overall, 90% of our students at the CTC are operating at a competent or advanced level, which kudos to what's going on out there. That's a very high number. I like seeing that with our kids. So it's tough just to look at PSSA and Keystones without seeing some of this other data and knowing that we have good stuff going on for all of our students. So one of the things we have to look at are called industry-based credentials. And our students at the CTC do get industry-based credentials over there. I'm talking about credentials in terms of healthcare. You have industry-based credentials in terms of masonry, and depends on the shop you're in. You have opportunities to get different industry-based credentials. So last year we had 51 students earn industry-based credentials, and actually this year they're actually going to be listed on their transcripts per state code. And that means those 51 students, that's roughly shy of 70% of all of our students who attend the CTC earned some type of industry-based credential last year, which is big. Overall, there were 192 industry-based credentials earned last year by all of our students. So 51 students earned 192 industry-based credentials. That's close to 4 per kid, which is outstanding. So these are things that follow them as they leave the CTC and enter the workforce. Some AP data analysis here. If you look, we have AP courses in bio, calculus, chemistry, English language and English lit, European history and music theory. We had a student take the Physics 1 exam, statistics, U.S. government and politics, U.S. history, and world history. So if you look, the AP exam is based out of a score from 1 to 5, 1 being lowest, 5 being the highest. Colleges typically give college credit for scores of 3, 4, or 5, depending on the program, depending on where you go. But 3, 4, or 5 is the target. If you look at those scores, 3, 4, and 5, you're looking at roughly 33% of our students earned a qualifying score that was high enough to get college credit on our AP exams overall, 33%. So what I did was I took a look at the past 5 years just to see if there are any trends. We've ranged from anywhere from 25% of our students had the passing rate was 25%, all the way up to we are now at 33.99. Our highest one was 2 years ago. It was actually the year that COVID hit. We had 40.5%, 40.57 of our kids percent earned a 3, 4, or 5 to get college credit, which was pretty good. So once again, the average score was out of 5. Uh-oh, it's not moving with me here. Well, regardless, the average score was out of 5. Our average score was a 2.03 out of 5. 2.03. If we go through test by test, I'm going to go through these quick. AP Bio. The numbers inside the chart are the actual number of kids who got that score. So to me, what's important is looking at that 3 or 4. We had 9 kids in AP Bio get a qualifying score. We didn't have anybody in AP Calculus get a qualifying score last year. Oh, there's a lag to it. We didn't have anybody in AP Chemistry get a qualifying score last year. AP English Language, we had roughly 15 kids get a qualifying score last year. AP Literature, we had roughly 12 get a qualifying score. European History, we had 1. AP Music Theory, we had 2 students. We only had one test taker take the AP Physics exam, and they passed, which was great. That's a tough test. If I'm not mistaken, I think that test gets offered here only once every 2 years, based upon the number of students who take the course. AP Statistics, we had roughly 11 students get qualifying scores. U.S. Government and Politics, we had 2 students get qualifying scores. AP U.S. History, we had 6 students. And then AP World History, which is another one of those real tough ones, we had 10 students get qualifying scores. So what I always like to do is to take a look at that, what that means per student. So what AP does is they have these things called AP Scholar Awards. There's 3 different levels, depending on how well you do on the test. And what that tells me is it gives me kind of a snapshot of how well our best students are doing on these really tough exams. So once again, looking over the years, it's good to say that we do have a lot of students who actually get these awards, and that's a good thing to have. Good thing to have in your college application, that you're an AP Scholar of any level. So given the fact that the best average score was during that COVID year, it's easy to see that we had the highest amount of kids actually get an AP Scholar award that year. So I'm seeing some pats on the back here in the crowd, so I'm assuming that we have probably somebody in here who may or may not have got one of those awards. In terms of dual enrollment, these are courses we offer here at the high school in conjunction with Mount Aloysius College. We have 10 courses that we offer here that students can pay to get college credit for, anywhere from 3 credits to 4 credits. So last year we had 159 students in those college and high school courses, and 42 of them actually chose to take those courses for college credit. The difference between college and high school dual enrollment and AP is that you just need to pass the class in order to get that and you actually get a transcript from that college, so whenever you leave there, you have a college transcript that you pay for as well. So students will pay for those credits. The amount of tuition saved by our students doing this was close to $60,000 last year, which is a huge benefit. Now, it depends on what program you go into, what college you go into in terms of how those credits are accepted, and that's a conversation those families need to have with colleges and institutions to see what are transferred. But anytime we can offer more of these courses and give that benefit to our students and families at a fraction of the cost, I think is a great opportunity. And then lastly, we'll talk about the Act 158 snapshot. So this was signed into law in 2018. COVID hit, so it kind of delayed the implementation a little bit, and this is the first year it's actually happening. So what used to happen is every student needed to pass all 3 keystones in order to graduate. They now have different options in order to graduate. So, and what I'll do is I'll list what those 5 pathways are. 1, you can pass all the keystones. 2, you can get a composite score on all the keystones if you don't get a below basic on any of them. 3, you can be a completer at the CTC. 4, you could take alternative assessments like PSAT, SAT, ASVAB. All these AP scores go into this. And then 5 is an evidence-based portfolio in which there are multiple things that a student would need to have in their portfolio in order to show that they're ready for college or career, like a college acceptance letter, letter of full-time employment. The issue is with that evidence-based portfolio, you need multiple things in order to have this evidence-based portfolio, whereas if you just take an alternative assessment or a CTC completer, it's just 1 or 2 things you need to have in order to graduate. So our current class of 2023 is broken down this way. We have roughly 38% of them who have qualified to graduate under Pathway 1. They've passed all 3 keystones. We have roughly 22% of them who have qualifying score in terms of a composite score, where they've passed enough of the keystones and have high enough scores in order to graduate. We have 15 students right now who are qualifying as a CTC completer or will be a CTC completer by the end of the year. We have 7 students in the alternative assessment pathway with some other assessments. We have a small amount of kids that are in that evidence-based pathway. And then we have roughly 18% of the students right now that haven't identified in some sort of pathway. And there's still time. So this is a normal number. So schools are working through this process now between the administration and counseling office to make sure students are identified by each one of these pathways. There are some waivers that are permissible right now based upon some extenuating circumstances with COVID that if we need to, we can use. But however, every one of our students should be able to fit into one of these 5 pathways here within the next couple months. And I feel like we're going to be in a good spot with the class of 2023. So, overall, that was a lot in a little bit of time. I wanted to give you some highlights and some what I see are areas of growth. So, when I look at the growth data for grades 5 to 7 ELA and grades 4 to 8 math, looks pretty solid. I don't want you leaving here thinking that, this is a lot of data. We don't have anything good to build off of. I think we have a lot of stuff good to build off of, and that's a good spot right there. The growth data for grades 5 to 7 and grades 4 to 8 math. In terms of our NOCTI performance, 90% of our kids being competent or advanced is huge. So hats off to those kids. Hats off to what's going on at CWCTC. And then lastly, we have a pretty good number of kids who are earning AP Scholar Awards. So all of those students who are working hard in our AP courses, hats off to you. I know it's not easy. As someone who took those courses, I know it's not easy. It'll pay off in the end because you want to take as many classes in college. So keep it up. In terms of areas of growth, you saw a slide with science, proficiency, and growth. That's an area we really need to look at district-wide, K to 12. And like I said, I see that as an opportunity because we're going to need to look at that anyways with the new standards coming out from PDE. I think open-ended proficiency is an area we need to really look at. And the fact that we have a literacy steering committee that is going to start tackling these issues, I think it's huge. Not just an ELA thing, it's an every content thing where students need to be able to read and understand the content in front of them and then respond to the questions that are asked to them instead of just a quick multiple choice question to see if you get it. It's a really higher developed question that needs to happen across the board. We're talking phys ed, through health, through math, through science, through social studies. It's every content area. It's not just reading or ELA. And then looking at Algebra 1, an area near and dear to my heart, we really need to take a look at what's going on in Algebra 1 in terms of open-ended questioning. So if it's an assessment where almost half of it is open-ended questioning, and we're not doing a really bang-up job doing open-ended questioning, we're not setting our students up for success in that course. So that's something we really need to take a look at moving forward, is how much of that questioning is happening within those courses at both the middle school and high school. So next steps. Last slide, we had winter keystones that are happening this week here at the high school. In bio and literature, we have winter keystones that are happening in January for Algebra 1 up here at the high school. And then we have another round of our NWEA MAPS assessments that are happening in January that our teachers will get data for. And that's going to be the data that gets reported out by the principals moving forward. We have PSSA testing coming up in grades 3 through 8 in April, keystones in May, and same thing with AP testing in May. So we are fast approaching the midway point of the year where a lot of this stuff starts happening. So I know everybody thinks April and May is the busiest time, but we have assessments going all the way through, and we're really starting to take a look at what those assessments are telling us with our areas of growth. So thank you. Okay.
Can you go back just one slide? I don't understand MS and
So that piece of data, Dr. Fike, you asked about the MS, 13% of possible points, high school, 15% of possible points. That means, on average, our students who take the Keystone for the first time at the middle school are only earning 13% of the possible points in open-ended questioning available to them. 13%. Yeah. Now, and same thing at the high school, only 15% of the possible points. Yeah, it's a 60-40 split. 60% of the test is multiple choice, 40% is open-ended. So if we're only getting 13% or 15% of those possible points, statistically there is almost no way to pass that exam. Okay? Anything else? Thank you. Mr. Smithola, you can take that screen up, okay?
Just keep going. I'm like, no. Oh, sorry.
Can I ask a question about some of that? So when our students are not passing the Algebra 1 Keystone in the middle school and they have to retake it in the high school, what are we doing to set them up for success the second time around? Or do we just expect they're magically going to remember more 6 months later?
Well, I will tell you that given my experience in another school district, there's a lot of that content on the Algebra 1 Keystone that actually falls into Algebra 2, into geometry and Algebra 2. Geometry is more algebraically based right now than it used to be. I can't speak specifically to what our high school does. I do know that a lot of that content bleeds into some of the coursework that is up here at the high school. We have some students who will take Algebra 1 again prior to taking it, and we have other students who move on through the curriculum. Now, in terms of how they get identified in terms of interventions, we do have them taking the MAPS assessments this year for the first time. And that would be something that they could get some extra interventions on through SSP whenever it's available. But I can't speak to exactly how much that's happening or what exactly is happening with that.
Our kids don't go from Algebra 1 in middle school to Algebra 2. They go from Algebra 1 to
geometry. Algebra 2, yeah.
Can I say something? Jason, thank you very much for that presentation. It was beautifully done. It was well explained. I really do appreciate that. And you can never solve a problem until you know what the problem is. And I appreciate that. But there's another thing that I wanted to bring up. I'm concerned about what's happening at the high school. And I don't know if the board would go along with what I'm suggesting or not. I see no reason for any child at the high school to have a study hall. I think every child all day long should be in some kind of a class. If you're having trouble in math, you go to another math class. It doesn't necessarily even have to be the one you're in, but there's a teacher there.
For support, yes.
You know what I'm saying? To me, study halls are not productive when you identify a problem, such as we have seen. And I don't know, I spent an exhausting time studying this issue 2 years ago, never had the opportunity to present it. But what was happening is there was a lot of wasted time. I was looking at every schedule, every teacher, everything, and I really think we need to come down hardcore on looking at high school scheduling. I mean, maybe the board doesn't agree with me, that's fine. I'm just trying to think of things that maybe we can do to help our children be better prepared for the future when they graduate. And
I don't think any of our freshmen have a study hall. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think our freshmen... So
what did he say?
He said most.
We don't have a lot of study halls this year.
I know that our freshmen are not. I have a freshman, and she's not sitting in any study halls.
This year.
Well,
It's very well
There's
done.
not a lot
They're
this year.
fully, at least our freshmen are fully scheduled. He said that most of them were seniors who have completed.
there are schools where there are no study halls, you know that.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not talking about recess for little kids. I mean, that's a whole different ballgame.
Right.
I'm talking about intensifying the key words for instruction: time on task. Time on task, nothing beats it. Time on task, to be continually exposed to the number of repetitions necessary to learn a concept, to me is very critical. And you can't get that in a coffee lounge or a study hall. I feel very strongly about, well, you know where I stand on student achievement. But anyhow, thank you very much for that presentation. It was very
Each study hall is probably manned by a certified teacher, so I would also suggest that a kid in a study hall could also get help there from the teacher that is overseeing the study hall. I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying, but I think putting kids in math classes with no purpose for that class is going to be a disaster. But again, the study halls as they exist, those kids could potentially get help from a certified teacher that is overseeing the study hall.
Dwayne, my concern is, can an English teacher, a literature teacher teach algebra? You know what I'm saying? They can't even help it. You know what I'm saying? I
They do have the daily
to expose
SSP
the kid
period.
back to a math certified teacher, for example, I think is a good move. We have to do something.
They do have a daily SSP period built into their schedule, that is when the students are supposed to be seeking the extra help from their teachers, so they can do that. I think that you're right, they shouldn't just be wasting away in a study hall, but I'd also like to see an importance placed upon the extra classes, the things where they get to do more hands-on.
If the board is satisfied with the way things are being done, then that's the way it's going to be.
That's not what I said. I was just saying that they do have an SSP where that is built in every day for them to seek remediation.
One in 8th grade and doesn't pass they take Algebra 1 again?
It depends. It depends on if they pass the course or not.
So if they pass the course, they move on, but if they don't pass the Keystone.
Typically where I've seen in other schools, and I can't speak to this because I don't know well enough here yet, but if a student passes that course, they move on through the math sequence.
So are they
regardless of what they do on the...
If they try again, like would they be expected to then, okay, now you're going to pass it? Taking further math classes? I'm just curious because I don't know how it works.
Is that teacher recommendation? Is that teacher recommendation?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
Algebra 1's not typically a high school class. It's more typically an 8th grade class. So over the years, we would have pretty high achievement in 8th grade. I think as we got around the COVID era, I think we saw a decline. So a lot of times a student that is enrolled in Algebra 1, as they come into the high school, it's not the highest level math class they can take in 9th grade. When pre-COVID, we would primarily use Keystone data from 8th grade for placements. What was the last couple years though, because the 8th grade data wasn't historically reflective of the way that it was hard to look at high performance in the PSSA, high performance in the class itself, and say, well, we're going to put you a step back in high school so that we can get a better score on the Keystone. I think we're at a critical juncture also in terms of Keystone exams, and I know we take, I say go back 4 or 5 years prior when our achievement in mathematics was much higher. It's tough to place that and say after the last several years that it's highly reflective of what's happening. We spent many years with not having a true Algebra 1 actually in the middle school, and that was reflected. I think we rectified that to where we now have it. So the long story short is this year probably not is a 1-to-1 you passed the Keystone, you didn't, because we weren't comfortable enough with the Keystone data last year in the year that it was to withhold a student back. So we try to place students where we feel necessary. All of our math placements are based purely on data. PSSA, Keystone, course. We also get recommendations from the instructional staff from 8th grade, and that's how we make the 9th grade decisions.
How many 8th graders take algebra? Do we know? Like half, 3/4?
It was, I would say it's, Mr. Clue, about half. Right. About 3/4 of them. That's what so you could say that difference between now versus then when 75% of the kids took it in 8th grade. So at that point, we only had 25% come in, and half of that group probably went into our split sequence, which is a year of Algebra 1A and a year of Algebra 1B. So we actually have 2 Algebra 1 sequences in 9th grade to try to accommodate what is the best needs. But again, the last 2 to 3 years have been pretty tough. And
to add to that, like she was saying, like our junior
class now, like their 8th grade algebra, like was cut in half basically.
Right.
They didn't even finish out the 8th grade because of COVID. So
Our seniors probably didn't have a full year of algebra in terms of the way that the sequencing is. Right.
So that can alter, that's going to alter.
How do you compare it to 5 years before COVID on average? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So it looks like like you said, that's an area of growth that we need to.
Can I add a comment on that? I think another problem that might stem with that is in the middle school, the math department is primarily calculator based. In the high school, you never see that ever in any. I've never touched a calculator other than AP Physics in high school.
I have also brought the same concern.
You never see one ever, and I think it's a big change, and I think it's a problem when you go, if someone fails the Keystone in middle school, when they come up, they no longer have that calculator. I know there's a portion of the test that is non-calculator based. And then Dr. Fike, I think that's a great idea, but unfortunately, I don't think we have enough free teachers to run that. But if you look at a school like Greensburg-Salem, they're the same size of us. They have 3 calc teachers. We have 1.
I'm agreeing with you. I think we need more teachers, period. And that's where our money should be going, is to teachers.
I'd like to add to what Caleb said. Yes, absolutely.
So you're saying in the classes, not just tests, you use calculators in middle school, but in high school, you don't use them even in classes?
No, not at all.
Okay, so that is probably...
It adds to the story, for sure.
Yeah.
But that affects that open-ended thing where they have to actually do it.
Do we have meetings between like all the math teachers in the district?
Oh, yeah.
Talking elementary through high school to say this is what we're doing, this is what you should expect, this is what we need by this grade. Do we do that?
Services.
Now, when you get to that test, are you able to use a calculator in high school?
Which test?
Well, so like if we're talking Keystones.
Right. There is a portion, there's about the first maybe 20 questions are no calculator.
No calculator.
And then you are allowed to use it beyond that point. But a lot of the time, if you don't have the reinforced skills, you're just basically plugging and chugging. And I think that's why you see a lot of decline in those scores.
And then you get frustrated too. Like, so if that first 20 is a struggle for you,
right,
the remainder
and then
becomes
that's why probably the open-ended are progressively worse, because in the multiple choice, okay, I'm going to plug these answers into this equation and get hopefully an answer, but on the open-ended, well, what do I do?
So and here's something to even add to that. I mean, who in real life doesn't use a calculator?
I'm sure
why do we need to?
That's what the test says. They can't use it.
No, I'm talking about like in our
class.
classrooms. Like, let's not set up our kids to struggle.
What do you think the problem becomes if they have to take a test where there isn't the availability of a calculator because you can't use one? We should be setting them up for success
in both arenas.
I mean, you can't be relying solely on a calculator
absolutely not.
But I think that's his point, is that you have this portion where you can't use that, and if you've used it all along and now you can't.
See, Dr. Boone addressed that. He sees that one of our major problems, right? The open-ended thing where you have to do it yourself. You don't just get to pick one. You have to actually do that. And he feels that that's one of the weaknesses that we have.
It looks like one of the huge parts of algebra that's a weakness there for us.
I think that's a good avenue to explore, is consistency amongst programs. What the middle school is doing should be the same as what the high school is doing, and that way it all leads in. And there's not this big shock the first 2 weeks of high school math where kids are dropping out of advanced courses because they can't use they're not allowed to use a calculator, and it was a very stressful 2 weeks for several of our students. There were tears in my house.
But the only open-ended questions are not just math. I mean, we have to talk about the reading comprehension and the literature and the science. Those are open-ended questions. Can you write a sentence? Can you write an essay? You know, this kind of thing.
It's a reading comprehension problem that we're having.
And the ability to relate it to an appropriate answer. Yeah, so it's not just math. The open-ended concept is something that has to be stressed in all areas, right, Dr. Boone?
Correct. Every
I think
course.
that's why they're starting this literacy.
Part of it, yeah.
Is part of the reason that, you know, everyone is looking at, after third grade, you're reading to learn. Or third grade, you're learning to read.
Right.
So if you have not learned to read by third grade and you can't do that, you're 10 already.
You are.
So back to the question I asked a little bit ago. Do you have meetings with like all of math teachers, elementary through high school, to say, by middle school, this is what we need them to do. By high school, this is what we need them to do. This is what we're doing. Does that happen so that they know?
In my time here, we have not had that yet. The curriculum overview process is the first step in that, to see what do we teach and when.
Okay.
And now once we get that documented, we can start on those next steps.
Sure.
Like what do you need once you leave middle school and so forth.
I did have a little conversation with Dr. Boone, and he talked about the first step is establishing the curriculum, but then once you have that, how do you implement it? How do you teach it? How do you deliver it? And he said that's going to come once you get the curriculum established. Now, how are you using it? How is it effectively being used so that the students are learning? Right? Is that right, what you said?
Correct.
That's the next...
It's more than just what do we teach, then it's how do you teach it, how do you assess it.
Delivery.
Correct.
Well, I think something we need to look at. Our teachers have not been, for a long time, provided the curriculum they needed to teach these concepts. We just bought new curriculum for the first time in how long? So I think maybe we'll see a change. Yeah. In some places, teachers are getting the things they actually need now in order to teach instead of having to come up with it on their own, which is ridiculous that they had to do that.
Christy, we have good teachers, though, who know. They
Oh, sure.
A lot of them really, really know what to do. They really, but I think that K through 12 thing is important. I agree with you.
Yeah.
It's a continuum. I thought they did that on in-service days, no?
It depends on what we have. We've had other activities planned out for them that they haven't met as a full math department yet. Or
Maybe as a board, we would like that.
I'm all for bringing back home ec.
What's that?
I'm all for bringing back home ec.
Okay.
Is that all you have?
That's all right.
Thank you for your presentation. Solicitor information.
I want to thank everybody for a wonderful year and for your support of our office. It's truly been a wonderful experience transitioning and coming out here from my office. I'm very thankful for how welcome you've made me. Other than that, I don't have any other report.
Thank you. Board Treasurer report. Do you have any information?
At this time, as I made mention last meeting, we did have the AFR. We did, and I should have written it down, we did have a amount to the fund balance, a little over $80,000 this year, which was good, especially with the fact that we did the paving project, we did the track project, we did we were able to do a lot of things last year that actually helped with our infrastructure to keep the kids safe, warm, and dry. We are currently working on the budget, and you'll see in this board packet, we also did an RFP, which actually was just looked at by Rebecca's office today, made some changes in the board docs, and that will be ready to go out as well.
Thank you.
We are at policies.
I'd like to make a motion to approve items number 1 and 2. I need a second.
Second.
Discussion.
So now this officially changes us to a date of
September 1st.
September 1st. Okay.
I did have a discussion with Dr. Boone about that. I've had several phone calls. It's a matter of a 2-week period. I don't think we did our due diligence in rolling out the change. People have enrolled their children in preschool based on knowing that, you know, if they had an August 31st birthday, they were still allowed to enroll. And for a 2-week period, and being that we poorly rolled that out, I asked him if he had a problem rolling that back to the September 1st.
I like September 1st better myself.
If anybody has an issue about that, we can discuss it. This changes it from, I think it was an August 15th date, back to what our original policy was. Based on even the information that Dr. Boone gathered, the majority of districts were a September 1st start. So does anybody have any concerns?
I agree that it should not be the June 1st. I just think with the August 15th date, we did a lot of talking to teachers, talking to the kindergarten teachers, seeing what their was with things, the principals. Did this initially. September 1st, you could have kids that are 4 starting, and I don't know. I
mean, really, but it's 2 weeks, so are you really not 4? I don't have a problem with changing. What I have a problem with is we did not notify any of the preschools in our area that this date was changing, so that if you go to enroll in some of these big preschools that we have here, they enrolled students thinking that they were going to be eligible to start. I want to say, you know, parents should know because we post these, but does anybody really pay attention to that? And employers are probably not paying attention to a policy change date like that. I just think we could have done a better job in changing this. And we have many students who are enrolled in preschool programs that are, there's probably not this huge chunk of them, but I think there are students who are going to be ready to come. I just think if you're going to be prepared to come, you're going to be prepared to come on September 1st of 2023.
Well, I think that there should be some sort of testing. No matter what, if you're on the brink of whatever date it is, there should be a test that if you're ready to come, you're ready to come. I'm just saying, I think.
In the Pennsylvania guidelines, Christy.
What?
Didn't we used to test all the students in the
Yeah,
developmental
they have them
kindergarten?
for testing, but I mean, if there's like a serious, hey, we're one day off, we come in and test. We're September 2nd, or we're August 16th, or whatever it is.
Yeah. We could have talked him
So do we want to go around and see what people want it to be? There's no sense in posting this if everybody isn't for posting it as September 1st. I asked him to change this and said we would have a discussion. So if people want to leave it August 15th, we can do that. That's up to, do we want to go around and see what everybody wants to vote on? Peggy, can you do a roll call? So it would be either August 15th or September 1st.
If we say August 15th or a different date, whatever we're doing, which is what we tried to do the first time and it didn't happen, was it's August 15th. In 2 years, it will be August 15th. Not next August, it's going to be August 15th. In 2 years, beginning August of 2020, whatever it is, it will be August 15th. That's what I'm saying. And it should never have happened how it happened before. Number one, with the date and with only giving it a year and with not telling anybody, that shouldn't have happened. But whatever we decide, if we decide on something earlier, it should not be starting in 9 months, it's going to be this, because it's already too late to change things, in my opinion.
Agreed.
I just think it's weird September 1st when we don't even, we start school even before September 1st.
So would it, but I think we had discussed about using the first day of school as a date because it's kind of arbitrary every year. Wasn't that the concern with using the first day?
I would prefer a hard date because then it's consistent across every year.
I tend to agree that it is just 2 weeks. I don't think any kids are really going to be making big strides in readiness, whether it's August 15th or it's September 1st. I do agree that it was rolled out poorly. and it did affect families that had based their children's preschool education on September 1st, so.
So I would have to say that I will rely on the recommendation because I don't know that I can judge when a child's ready. I'm not an educator. So if the recommendation from Dr. Boone is September 1st, that's what I'll do.
I do think a test would be nice, even if parents had some question like, hey, our kid has a late summer birthday, we're not sure if they're ready or not. Is there some way to provide guidance on that?
Let me add to what I was saying, even though it's like arbitrary or whatever, but say school starts August 26th, right? Say it starts August 26th. The kid gets to come to school at 4 years old.
What do you recommend?
Because, say, they don't turn 5 until August 31st.
August 30th was my birthday. I was that kid.
Am I like missing something? Like, you know what I mean? Like August 26th, say we start school. The kid gets to
Dr.
come.
Clara, do you have something to add here?
I just wanted to mention, Mrs. Smith had asked if
Hold on a minute, I
Oh,
wasn't
sorry.
finished.
I thought you were done. Sorry.
No. So August 26th, the kid can start school at 4 years old. Because we're saying September 1st is when we're cutting it off at 5. So on August 31st is their birthday. They can come to school at 4 years old. They turn 5 on the 31st. They make it to September 1st. I mean, am I like an idiot, or does that sound stupid?
No, that's what it's always been. It's always been September 1st.
It's always
No.
been.
But what I've never heard of it being September 1st, but in the South we go to school a lot sooner than we did up here. But like, why wouldn't we correlate it whenever we start school?
I think it's because the school start date changes every single year. So you could say, this
So
year
what's
we're
wrong
starting
with
school
that?
on August 26th, which is a Tuesday. Next year, no, we're not starting until the 29th. That could really mess parents up if your birth date's like, depending on when you start school is when you can go to kindergarten or not.
So I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying.
Oh,
So on September 1st, you have to be 5 years old. Why not we start school after September 1st?
Because then you would lose, we would be going longer into June.
Just use our X days in the summer.
Use your what days?
Our X days that we have to have.
Our ACT days, so
80
you-
days, not X days, sorry, that's
That doesn't,
post office.
so that Act 80 days are intentional for teacher staff development. You don't want to be providing all of your staff development after the kids have gone home for the summer. You want to be providing Act 80 days throughout the year when they're correlating with the NWEA maps and such, so that we're training teachers during the year on things that we need them to be doing. That's why the Act 80 days are spread out like
Sure,
that.
and I get that 100%. I mean, I think like if we would only use like maybe 2 or 3 Act 80 days to push it to September.
But you would
It
still be-
just doesn't make sense why we would want to start school before the elected date for a child to make sure that they're 5 before they come to school. Like, it's
So here, I guess, is the other end of that. So it's the 26th, we start school, you don't turn 5 till the 29th. I'm not sure how much the student matures in 3 days to push off the start of school and cause us to go 4 extra days in June, because that's what we would be doing. Instead of like a June 5th end date, we'd now be ending about June 10th or 11th. And that can mess kids up as well. So IUP, for example, has a great summer January program. If the students aren't graduating until June 10th or 11th, then they actually have already started college and have to come back in order to finish.
They graduate in May.
So, but they wouldn't. Because they still have to finish after X amount of days
Their
of
graduation.
instruction.
But their last day of instruction was in
But
May.
it would be pushed out as well, because they'd still need that 4 extra days. So I guess let's just go around, see what we want to do. If everybody wants to revisit this, 6 months down the road, fine, but like, we need to do a better job of rolling this out. We need to contact schools. We need to be telling, making sure that the preschools aren't enrolling kids, because now even the kids that are in the first year of preschool have now already completed 1 year of preschool. And if we push it to next year, then that's still going to be an issue. So it does
That's
need
why
to
I'm saying it
be
can't
2
just be
years
a year.
further out.
Yeah.
It can't be right now, and it can't even be next year. But
I'd like to make a motion to table this until we can get some more information out to you.
I think we need to know so that people can be planning their lives. I mean, so let's just see what majority wants to do between an April 15th and a September 1st. August 15th, I'm sorry, April, jeez.
I go with the recommendation of the superintendent.
Okay. There is.
Yeah.
So I need a...
Jason, what's your recommendation?
So I did, I made a motion, we had a second, and we're discussing.
Michelle.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Dr. Clara wants to talk.
Okay.
Very briefly, two things. One, we have a screener we use at the end of the year in May for kids who enroll. So we can use that same tool because we know that's a tried and true tool. If we had any questions, you were asking, is there something we could give? We have something that I think is very reliable. So yes, to answer your question, we have that. The August 15th date could interfere with kindergarten orientation, which often happens a week or two before kids start arriving to school. We try to have that orientation, those 2 or 3 days where kids come in that second or third week of August. So just be mindful of that. That's going to be around the same time. So
the August 15th date would just mean that when they were coming there, they were possibly having their birthday at the same time as orientation.
Just be mindful of it. That's when we have that orientation is like second week. So the kids are coming in about a week later and they're not like, whoa, first time in school, right? So just why I want to get that timeline of when we do that and why, so that you keep those two pieces in mind.
Thanks. Is Mr. Paichu here? Like, what are our kindergarten teachers saying? Does Mr. Haichu have any input? What are our kindergarten teachers actually saying? Because they're the boots on the ground whose opinion actually matters more than mine.
That's what our committee looked at the very beginning. That's what our committee looked at the very beginning.
Oh, is it?
I think a motion to table.
What did they say?
And the recommendation was, there was support for earlier than it is now.
I was just going to echo what Mrs. Smith just said and to point out that I believe that Mrs. Smith had some of those direct conversations with our kindergarten teachers. I know that's what I was hearing from our kindergarten teachers when this conversation was happening earlier, that they were in favor of that earlier date in terms of when the child turns 5, just for basic maturational reasons and school readiness considerations.
And that was a recommendation. Correct me if I'm wrong. That was a recommendation from some of the admin that deal with the younger kids as well, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. That's what I thought. I didn't want to put words in your mouth.
No. From my perspective, both. When I think about the brain development of the child and the school psychologist perspective from my background, I was in favor of the initial conversations that I was hearing as well.
But it was rolled out incorrectly. That's the crux of everything, and the date was way too early. So I would say that either we stick with September 1st, or we say in 2 years we're moving to August 15th. That's the date that's...
We can take it over for that.
So right now I need a motion to amend the motion.
Michelle, can I say something?
Yes, but can we amend this motion first and then we'll go. So I'd like to have somebody I can amend it, right? Because I made the motion.
Yep.
So I would like to amend this motion to remove item number 2 from the original motion, and we will just vote on item number 1. And then we can open up discussion on agenda item number 2. Okay. Were you the one that seconded my first? Okay. All those in favor? Aye. So now I need a second to the motion to approve item number 1 under policies. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. So agenda item number 2, policy 201. Dr. Fike.
I spent the majority of my professional career dealing with this issue. And if you give me 100 kids, all who are the same birthday, they're all 5 years old, I guarantee they are not all in the same place.
Correct.
We are dealing with an issue that only has one factor, age, just age. All this child has to do is be alive 5 years, okay? It's not that simple. When these kids come into school, there's a normal distribution of abilities, levels of development, socialization skills, and so forth. And that's one of the things you do in kindergarten, is you look at those and evaluate those kids and teachers do this all the time. They've done it all the time. So when you talk about whether this is August 15th or September 1st, go ahead and pick one. It's not going to make any difference. These children are all individuals, and you can set that arbitrary deadline of that number 5, that age 5, if you want to, but that still doesn't change what happens once they get to school. If they were born a month later, they might be more advanced than the other kids who got in. You have to make some decision here about what the deadline is. You can't have a moving, revolving deadline. That's not good. People need specific information and data by which they can plan their lives and work with their children. And it would seem to me that almost every school that I know of is probably in session by September 1st, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so there's nothing wrong with the September 1st deadline. Did you know in some schools in Pittsburgh, they're going in the middle of August and so forth? You can't do that. You can't have a revolving door. You have to specify a guideline. This is a guideline because when you read the Pennsylvania regs, they do provide for other options if a child has, a different set of needs. So I think it's imperative that we establish a specific guideline so that our constituents know what it is that they should be able to count on.
So here's one of the points that we made last week or last month, going with the September 1st date versus August 15th. If you are 6 by September 1st, you can go to first grade.
That's correct.
So it doesn't, if we make an August 15th deadline for kindergarten, and so that student doesn't get to come to kindergarten because they don't turn 6 until August 31st, they can skip kindergarten altogether and come straight to first grade. So are we doing anybody any favors that falls in that 2 weeks by skipping someplace where we teach kids a lot of hands-on skills that they may or may not have? That was one of the reasons why I didn't like the August 15th date. Whenever you look at school code supersedes any policy that we put out there. And I don't think that that was something that was necessarily shared with the policy committee. I don't think anybody that was giving information on when they thought a date should start, because I think that was all news to us as we sat in this meeting and heard the school code read to us that it's September 1st.
Right.
So can I mean, there needs to obviously be a motion to table this. If there is, okay, so let's vote on this. We can do a roll call vote so that we know who is voting in favor of it being September 1st and who is not, and then that way we'll know if we need to change it back to the 15th.
What's the recommendation of the superintendent?
September 1st.
September 1st, okay.
Okay, so I'd like to make a motion to approve item number 2, policy 201. And the way that the motion is read is to change the start date from 8/15 to 9/1.
I'll second that motion.
Roll call.
Dr. Beck?
Yes. 9/1.
Mr. Friend?
Yes.
Mrs. Geyer? Mr. Lizza?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Rear? Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Shipley?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith, hurry. Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries. 8 yes, 1 pass.
Personnel.
I'd like to make a motion to approve personnel items 1 and 2. I need a second.
Second.
Discussion.
Do you have 2 on there, unpaid leave? I only have one question. Do we have coverage for those days? Do we have a teacher to cover for those days?
Upon approval of this request, they'll put it into the subsystem to get coverage for that day, yes.
I'm concerned about that.
Understood.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
On to education.
I'd like to make a motion to approve education items 1 and 2. I need a second.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Mrs. Williams, I would just like to thank our counseling staff in the creation of their 329 plan. So, thank you.
Thank you.
On to finance.
I'd like to make a motion to approve finance items 1 through 3. I need a second. Discussion?
I did have a discussion. Is on the transportation part of it. Have we? Oh, I want to see the question. I know that you were kind of just wrapping up with like the new system with how the transportation goes, like how the traveling goes with that new system and stuff. Have we looked to see if we're able to reduce buses yet?
That will actually occur next year.
Okay.
Contractually, we have to, if we wanted to reduce a route, we would have to contact the bus garage contractually by April, or not April, August 15th, sorry.
Okay. Understood.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, we have nothing under buildings and grounds or athletics and activities. Before citizens' comments, I'd just like to say a couple things. Committees for the coming year, if anybody would like change from a committee that they're on or added to a different committee, please reach out to me. And we'll need to be getting some dates together for Peggy to schedule those meetings. The other thing that I would like to say, I would just like to thank everybody for their support. This has been a really trying couple years for all of us. I think there is great potential here in our district. As somebody very wise always says to me, what was the best time to plant a tree? It was yesterday. The next best time is tomorrow, today. I think if we continue to look back, we are never going to improve. I'm here to work hard. I think everybody else here is here to work hard in the same direction for the betterment of our students in the district. So thank you. Do you have any?
Can I ask a question about one of our handouts that we got?
Sure.
It's a document titled, Pam, this would be for you. It's a document titled Federal Tax Certificate. On page 2, it says, use of sale proceeds. The cost of issuance is $50,000. Is that what we're paying to get this loan? Just to issue the loan, $50,000.
Okay, I'm looking at, there's the
Because
act-
it cuts down the cost of the project is cut by $50,000 then, because it's going to cost of issuance. Cost of issuance. Issuance.
I'm not thinking that is on the, because this month there is Act 57 resolution, which is from the state, the transportation RFP, and then there's the approval for certificate of deposit.
We're not sure what paper you're looking at.
It's called Federal Tax Certificate, and it's the second page. Because we had talked about what this was going to cost to do, and we had thought it was $25,000. Now it's $50 on page 2, and that is subtracted, Michelle, from the amount of money we're going to get from the building that we're going to do. We're taking $50,000.
Let me look at last month's
Cost
board
of
meeting.
issuance, which means they're going to issue.
That was
something.
actually in
The federal
last
tax.
month. Give me 1 second.
It was this one with all the documents. Thank you. You're welcome. It's in the bond.
From
Yeah,
last
it
meeting?
actually, yes, it actually, the closing costs and everything in total was $54,000.
$54,000.
That is
That's a
indeed
far
correct.
cry from what we voted on before. That's a far cry. $54,000.
What happened?
Nothing.
We're just,
It's too
what it
late.
is.
It's too late. But I told you, Christie, I've watched those people their pockets bulging over the years, and that was one thing I was paying attention to. And I did vote no on that, but $54,000.
Yeah, the cost of issuance is $50,000. Yes.
Yeah.
Is that what we voted on?
Yes.
A lot of money. Here's teacher.
Yeah, the only thing that changed with these documents was there were a couple that had Mr. Petonic still listed, correct?
I'm sorry.
The only thing that changed on any of these documents was a couple of them had Mr. Petonic still listed.
Correct.
So it was 50 that we voted on?
Yes.
Okay.
But I remember the discussion, it was supposed to be 25.
Right. And unfortunately, it came in at 54.
Okay, do we have any citizens' comments?
Real quick before we do that, I just wanted to thank Kayla's parents for coming tonight to the dinner. Appreciate your attendance and appreciate your input during the discussion on math and the calculator. Thanks, Coach.
I'd also like to thank the cafeteria staff.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
It was delish.
They did a nice job.
Hey, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Bottom right.
We're going to see you on the 22nd, so.
Going to town. Huh?